Well, it's not Friday.
It's not Friday.
We're both in town.
I know this is so weird. Summer, we're both in town, but it's not unusual because it's not Friday. So Ron, we have this kind of ongoing thing that we're supposed to do this on Friday nights at 6, and summer has just been all over the place.
Yeah, life
But,
life sometimes gets in the way.
so I'm wondering, John, if we go back through the archives, have we ever actually done a Wednesday night?
I I don't know. That would be interesting. So maybe this is our first Wednesday. Hey,
Yep,
it's a day ending in Y, so we're good.
exactly.
It is 6 o'clock, and we've got a special episode with Ron Gallagher from Maximum Velocity Physical Therapy. Hey, Ron.
Hey, Ron.
What's up, guys?
I, and
So
I
happy
have,
to be here.
I have to disclose, I've actually had Ron on another podcast for my class where he talked about physical therapy. So it is so great to have experts like Ron in our area willing to come on to our, different podcasts and sort of share the secret sauce about what he does. And this is really fantastic, Ron, to be able to connect with you.
Well, I got to say the feeling is mutual. I'm sure Ted's probably tired of hearing about it because I pretty much mention it every chance I get. But Ted was a lab TA when I was a student at UNLV, so we go back some 20 years.
We go back a long time. I think it's at least 20 years ago. And,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, 1994.
I'll tell you, he was a very good student. I'm gonna let you know that. You only remember the really good ones and the really bad ones. So
Yeah.
he must have been, well, he was one or the other.
There you
But hey, I want to say for everyone to hear, I think you guys are doing a really great job with this podcast, and it's really honor to be here. I'll take any chance I get to talk about triathlon and sort of nerd out, and so this is a great opportunity for me. So super happy to be here. Happy for whatever comes of this, because you guys are doing such a great thing with this. So appreciate having me.
Well, thank you, and we enjoy it, and it's really the highlight, I know, of my week, and Ted and I have talked about this as well. We just enjoy the sport, and we enjoy talking about it. And so,
It's like the ultimate gold mine. How many training variables can you modify before somebody has a race day?
That's right.
You're exactly right with that. And you know, the funny thing, I was actually thinking about this over the last, I don't know, week or so, how insane it is that we're trying to do 3 sports.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And when John and I have talked about this a lot of time, to do 3 sports well,
Mhm.
right? And I was just thinking back to when I was a runner, and just running was hard. Like just being a good runner is hard.
Right.
And
I say every day, running is an Olympic sport.
yeah,
So it's not like we just slap shoes on and head out the door. This is a advanced Olympic sport, and yet we want to do 3 of them.
yeah.
And, all the other stuff that goes with those 3. So
Yeah, we're actually really thinking about this is like exceptional. And you know, I was at a race this weekend up in Canada, and just watching the people, and you know, just watching everyone and thinking like, man, like there's 800 people out here
Mhm.
doing this, and how actually amazing that is that a human can do this. And
it gives me chills.
it gives me chills.
to hear
It gives
you
me
talk
chills
about it.
too.
Well,
Absolutely.
We were watching this guy at the beginning of the bike, and he's on a mountain bike, and he's got 56K to go, or 56 miles to go, right?
Right.
And he's out there doing his thing, and I'm like,
He
man,
probably
go,
doesn't
man,
even
you
know
go.
how hard that is.
Yeah, exactly.
He
And
probably
so-
doesn't even know that he's behind the 8 ball.
Yeah.
Have a rough day.
So, but I just think it's exceptional, and you know, and my hats off to you, Ron. I mean, I know you've helped a lot of people with issues, and not just that, and then coaching, and you know, and you've embraced the triathlon community in Las Vegas for a long time. And so my hats off to you, because I know what you do is not easy. I can tell you that.
well, let me
Appreciate it. I'll say it's definitely a labor of love.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, the amount of resources and traveling and learning, and you know, trying to be an expert, to do the very best I can. You know, my clinic doesn't accept insurance, so if somebody's going to opt out of their insurance, I feel like I need to bring some value. So, you know, the grand search to try to be a master at something you'll never be a master at, like that's kind of where I think we all can agree. That's the space we live in.
well, what I really,
You never know enough.
and what's neat is that you're also a student of the sport, and you have that science background as well. But what's interesting is you mentioned, Ted, watching the 800 athletes, not only watching 800 athletes, but this is why, Ron, what you do is so important. Each one of those athletes are doing it 800 different ways.
Yep.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's where,
All levels,
Ron,
all
you're,
goals, all
yeah,
backgrounds. It's every single one of them is a story in itself.
mhm.
The people, to watch them, and the people that put it on, and it's like people, and it's just so cool.
So it was fun trying to settle in on a topic that we would cover tonight. And I wore my chain shirt because we ended up settling on gait retraining and running metrics, which you're very much a student of running. So
Yes.
how do you get started in this line of thought here on gait retraining and running metrics?
To be perfectly honest, it started because I couldn't figure out how to make my pains go away. I spent all this time and money in PT school, and my training's not enough to make my calf pain go away. And so I started doing some research on continuing education courses, and I found running medicine in Charlottesville, Virginia. And little did I know that that would change the trajectory of my life. Running medicine is a running conference every year where anyone who's presented a paper on running gets invited. And the year that I happened to be looking for that was the triathlete.
Hmm.
It was Friday, Saturday, Sunday. It was swimming, biking, and running. And it was a whole day dedicated to each sport and kind of intermixing how they work together and how they're so separate. And I had no idea that there was a whole subgenre of super skilled, super highly educated people who only work with runners all day. And the running portion was taught by Jay DeSherry. Probably know that name. He was the director of the Speed Clinic in Charlottesville, Virginia, where they treat exclusively runners 100% of the time. Monday through Friday, that's all they do. And they have a $4 million treadmill. It's like 50 feet long, 6 feet wide, pressure plates all throughout, 360 motion degree capture cameras. And they're just doing amazing work and studying all the variables that help us run. And people come from around the world to have their gait evaluated there. And it was just an amazing experience, and left with a wealth of information that I would just crunch all year round and then go back the next year and crunch. And so I went 5 years in a row. And, luckily I have a lifestyle that can contribute to that. And just basically got super duper well trained. Saw Chris Powers there, Brian Heiderscheit, some of the big guns in running research, and just tried to learn as much as I possibly could. And then when I got back to the regular clinic, I figured out that if the level of difficulty of helping a runner do running is more than the general orthopedics, then running medicine makes me a far better general orthopedic PT. And, like perfect example is taking somebody who had their ACL reconstructed and then within 9 months do a full Ironman. Like that's physical therapy, coaching, Ironman. And like the ability to be able to do that's like super fun. So it's a labor of love. And some days I have to collect paycheck.
Oh, I love it. So on this topic then, I mean, that's a great background and expertise is awesome. Where do you, if someone comes to you to talk with you about running, how do you go about talking with them?
We start with a gait evaluation typically. If they're currently running, if they're so injured that they can't run, that's different. I'll get the running piece later. But we start with a full physical therapy evaluation. And then at the end of that, we put them on the treadmill. And essentially, I'm trying to answer a couple of questions. Is this a gait problem or a table problem? And a table problem would be something physical impairment like weakness, stiffness, something orthopedic, or is it the way that they're processing the movement of running and how the impairments influence how that person's moving? I've been doing that now 10 years, probably 500 gait evaluations on my belt, and not one of them is the same, and all of them require skeleton information. And sometimes you go down this art path, and sometimes you go down this science path, and sometimes it's more table and sometimes it's more gait. It's like always a mixed bag, and it's so fun to crunch footwear and injury past and how they train and try to make sense of all those details and put them in a position to get to pain-free, start to build an aerobic base on top of the strength base, and then apply that aerobic base into whatever goal they want to reach. So pretty much starts with a gait evaluation.
I love it. All right. So as you get talking with them, what are the common questions that they have for you as they get started in this process?
The questions they have for me are, when we usually the person's had a few run-ins with other professions by the time they get to my table. One common one is the shoe store, and they had their little foot video on just their foot, and they come with footwear questions based on what's happening at their foot. Well, oftentimes the problem's way up above the foot, and just looking at the foot made them bias. And so they selected footwear on a bias evaluation, and then they had an outcome based on another wrinkle of compensation. And then, now they're frustrated and anxious, and there's so many health professionals out there that'll tell them to stop, that they don't know if they should be even continuing. Like, am I hurting myself by continuing to go? There are no bad runs, just unprepared bodies. And if we can put them in a position to tolerate the ground reaction force, then there's no reason why they can't run. So I can't remember anybody in the last couple of years I said, I don't think you should run.
I love the fact that you said that. One of the things that I always implore with people is there's no bad exercises, only bad load.
I 100% agree with that.
So that's going along the same mode, right?
Yeah,
And,
absolutely.
but it's really hard to go against the establishment. And I think you made mention of that, when people are like, they're told when they're 20, oh, you shouldn't be running.
Yeah.
And then they're 35, like, I really want to run. All my friends are running, and
that's not evidence-based.
It's not
based on science. But that's based on the practitioner's bias and insecurities, and it's more about them than it does about the athlete.
But in some ways, they're right? They won't get injured if they don't run. but it's such a cop out. You're
1,000%.
Exactly right.
Yeah. The people who come to me, running is a part of their soul. And it's not my responsibility to judge them and tell them how they're supposed to handle their soul. My responsibility is to look at the body of knowledge, look at how they're training, look at their bodies, and then try to figure out a plan that helps them do that. And sometimes it doesn't look the way that they want it to look, but it grows into that over time. And, it's my responsibility to get them healthy and get them back out there in a capacity that's efficient and effective for now, and then with the plan to move forward and grow over time. But
so I love that you answered the question about how they what the expectations kind of are of them. What do you do with the patient that is what's the word I'm looking for? Not patient, a patient that's not patient. Because I think that's a big challenge that we all have
for sure.
So I assume you see that all the time.
And there's a lot of people in orthopedics who have a strong disdain for treating runners because of this perceived expectation that runners have of getting back out there. So my thing is, you're not going to be more efficient sitting on the couch. So if somebody comes in and they're dying to run and it's really an efficiency problem, if I give them the right cues, they can run pain-free. So we might take away some volume, we might take away some tempo, we might take away some days, but we need to modify the volume in a way that they can be successful. And at the same time, they need to work on their cues. So the cueing aspect of how I give running homework means that the person is not going to rest. So I don't get that phenomenon happening because I'm not asking them to rest.
Yep.
I'm asking them to do their homework, which is, I know you're used to 5 or 6 miles at 8-minute mile pace. I want you to run easy, but this time I want you to move your feet faster than you feel comfortable with and really focus on the position of your headlights. If your headlights can face forward and your cadence is fast enough, you should be able to run 20 minutes with no pain. And so the exercise or the strengthening process is happening behind that. Meanwhile, you're giving them running cues to be sure that they're out there being efficient and as symptom-free as they can be. And like, there's a way around that. It's when you say, don't do the thing that you love the most. Don't do the thing you're most connected with because it's bad for you, so you should rest. Those are the people who become an irritating person for the clinician. Yeah. When really that's not how we should handle it.
Agreed.
I love it. And you know, what's interesting is when I'm running, I think I'm running like Eliud Kipchoge, but then I see myself run and I'm more like a diesel train. It just, you know, doesn't match. And
Yeah,
so
well, I've seen you run and you're more of the, what is it, the before? More of the before and left.
Yeah, right. I love it. Well, thank you. But yeah, but I like how you're talking about cues. So
Yes.
what can people, you know, how do you, I guess, match what's really happening with what they think is happening, and how do you maybe address that?
Yeah, so we had called this podcast Gait Retraining and Metrics.
Mm-hmm.
So at the speed clinic, they really studied with thousands and thousands of people on this particular treadmill on the effects of a healthy runner with these very specific cues. And the cues actually spit out the metrics that we're looking for. So if I test their stride rate and it's 158 or less, 80% of people running at that particular stride rate are injured. 164 or less is about 60%. So the slower the stride rate, typically the more injured that person is. And a great study was done where they counted the stride rate of all the people in the first 25% of a marathon, and those were 180. Very solid rhythm of those runners. The next 25% was around 168 to 164. And those folks are about 40 to 60% injured. The next 25%, 25 to 50% are all under 164, and about 60% of those folks are injured. The last quarter, everybody's slower than 158 and pretty much everybody's injured. So as that rhythm slows down and the efficiency gets worse, that person will experience probably more pain. And one of the cues that they give is move your feet faster than you feel comfortable with. And that cue is really specific to 5 to 10% change in stride rate. And that stride rate is really key to getting this person to run without knee pain, without foot pain, without hip pain. So the process of putting a person on the treadmill and identifying impairments start by counting the stride rate. And then from the stride rate, we look at the amount of vertical displacement, which is how much pogo is happening. The shortest line between two spots is a straight line. So if the ground reaction force is somewhere between 2 and 7 times your body weight, and you're using a pogo stick, you're probably using more like 7 times your body weight, and that's why it hurts. So picking your feet up and using a cue like move your feet faster than you feel comfortable with will actually bump that stride rate up, and that should get them to run a little bit less bouncy and hopefully with less symptoms. Notice that I didn't give them any numbers, thing that they do hate. They want the they want the number in their ears. You know, I want 168 in my pod, you know, my ear pods or my running or metronome. And that's really what the trap is. So if somebody at home is listening and they heard the number that I shared, and you're trying to change your stride rate, don't run to a metronome. That's where the art of this thing comes in. Because if you increase that stride rate too fast, too soon, that's when something else falls off.
I love it, and like you talked about. There's a lot of good research about stride rate injury, and the benefits of taking faster stride rate. But that's interesting. Do you come across people that do need to go in the other direction, where they need to slow their stride rate down? It seems like it's always a speed up issue.
Very, very rare. Very rare. Like we were joking before, I did have a woman who was 220.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know how she did it. And what's fun is, I kind of have this game where I think based on the history and the physical exam and the movement exam, what this person's going to run like. And I'm never, you can just never predict it. You have to get them on the treadmill. You have to take the metrics, and you have to videotape it and teach them about it, because it's never what you predict. And I'd never in a million years predicted she would be at 220. And it was just really, really short, really, really quick stride. And she didn't put any force on the ground. She literally had no force moving through her body. And it was just like a stick moving across. So rather than give her numbers to change, I changed the position of her heel. I use a cue that we call increase heel drive, which is you try, there's a string that comes off your butt and it pulls your heel up, and that changes a rocking horse stride into a wheel, and it slows down the stride rate naturally. Mm-hmm. What I wanted to do is put her brain in a position to slow that down, and not be a human saying, well, you should probably be more like 180. Mm-hmm. That's not my place. Mm-hmm. Place is to try to make her more efficient. And the stride length, stride rate part of her equation was all stride rate. So by increasing her heel drive, it made her a little bit less quick to turn over, and that turnover changed into a healthy place. Once she had the strength to pull that off, she runs pain-free. I'm still friends with her on Facebook, and she's killing it. But literally every time I see her name on Facebook, I'm like, she had 220. I've never even seen that before. 190, 188 is not uncommon. I don't really change those, but 220 was a lot. That was like an outlier. So I always remember her.
Well, and that speaks to the uniqueness of every runner, and that's
so
why
fun.
Having someone with an eye for running to work with ends up being really important. All right, so you started getting into a little. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Ted.
No, I was going to ask him more about the vertical oscillation side.
Yes.
So I think you mentioned that. Is that something that you handle through stride length, stride frequency, or do you have a different cue for that?
Definitely use. So that'll be a stride frequency problem. So the turnover will be too slow. And essentially what happens is as the center of gravity moves up, the overstride occurs. So overstriding is what creates the head popping up. As soon as the heel strikes way out in front of the center of gravity, with everything sort of in a line, all the bones in a line, it shoots all that force straight to your spine, pops your head right up. So the pogo is usually an overstride, and that overstride is because the turnover is too slow. So I give them a cue of move your feet faster than you feel comfortable with, and essentially whatever is supposed to happen will happen. And the other thing that I take a lot of pride in is I'm not just trying to get runners better to take their knee pain away today. I want them to be a better runner in 6 months, in a year, with a good block of solid training and not having to take days off. Because if I give them a number, in fact, this is what happened. The research was published that if I increase a person's stride rate by 5%, there's a 20% reduction in ground reaction force. If I increase it by 10%, there's a 38% reduction in ground reaction force. And we thought, yes, we'll just give people metronomes. And so injured runners came, tested their stride rate. It's too slow. Here's a metronome. And for about 3 or 4 months period, I was doing that. And then what I started to notice is the first people that I prescribed started coming back, and they all said exactly the same thing. When I left you, my knee felt great. I started running faster. Everything started feeling great. And now my knee pain is back. They all said exactly the same thing. And the key component to that is they started running faster. Now, by prescribing a number, their gait per proportion got off exactly the same as it was before. Stride rate problem is back again. And I didn't give them the chance to move that stride rate faster as their pace increased. So they ran themselves back into the same problem. So what we started doing was going away from prescribing a particular number and then giving them the cue of move your feet faster than you feel comfortable with. And then when their pace picks up, so does their stride rate. Because we can't increase somebody's stride rate by more than 5 or 10% over the course of 2 to 4 weeks. So anything more than that, and usually something falls off.
So I think it's interesting when you're talking about metrics, right? And because a lot of these metrics people have and they don't even realize they have them. So I got my watch right here.
Right.
After I run, if I'm wearing the appropriate chest strap, I can get all this information. And it's amazing that, you know, so many athletes have this information and they don't even know it, right?
Right.
They just, oh, I finished my run. Oh, how far did I go? How fast did I go? What was my heart rate? And they don't know they have ground reaction force in a lot of these. Now they have vertical oscillation. They have stride length. They have stride length. They have stride frequency. And a lot of this can be done on their own. Like, don't get me wrong, like your business is great and everything, but I think people need to recognize that a lot of this is there for them. So do you take their information? Like, so when they come in, do you ask?
100%.
Yeah.
100%. At the interview, or sorry, at the phone call, I'll say, if you have a training log, bring that too.
Yeah.
And usually that's Garmin Connect. And we can go over the last, because usually the error that they made was 3 weeks ago.
Right.
Increase in volume and increase of tempo in the same week that, you know, caused them to be over fatigued or overworked. And then now 3 weeks later, they're injured. And you'll see a dramatic change in the stride rate. And, you know, the usually 3 weeks back is where that occurred. So absolutely.
Yeah.
And, you know, ongoing with runners who are trying to change their stride rate, you know, I don't necessarily want them in real time looking at the metrics. I want them to be able to feel it, because God forbid your watch dies in a race, you know? So you need to be able to feel that. And we use that ongoing. So I gave you 30 minutes. How did it go? Well, my knee was a little sore. Okay, well, what was your pace like? What was your tempo like? You know, what kind of elevation changes were there? And then we'll work all the way back to whatever we're trying to work on with them and say, see, your stride rate fell to 156 on that heel. And then when you came down, it was supposed to increase dramatically and it didn't. And that's when the pain started, because we didn't let our stride rate go with us as the elevation changed it down. And I think that probably contributed to the symptoms. The strength program is going to help you catch that. But at the same time, we need to be aware that when the terrain goes to down, and that we need that stride rate to pick up and allow yourself to speed down the hill. You know, we're not trying to get on 8-minute mile pace and stay on 8-minute mile pace. It's okay to be 750 through that section, because 815s come in the next time you go up. So how do we change the tempo and the stride rate and make all that match? I'm trying to build a rhythm there, and that's really where the art of it all comes in. So we try to use the metrics as a way to be sciencey, and then use that as a way to influence the art. And then the balance of those two things is how the person can run pain-free.
Oh, I love that. And that really speaks to the science part of this is that we know if you run faster, if you run on different surfaces, or if you run uphill or downhill, that changes the gait. And so
1000%.
that's so neat to hear you
I
talk
really want
about.
to say, I don't care what level you're running out there. There are no 12 to 13-minute milers. Honestly, like humans run. We're designed to run. Bipedal, our ancestors ran everywhere. Everyone's a runner. And if you think you're doing something bad and you're running 13, 14-minute miles because you're doing something bad, that's what hurts.
Hmm.
And if you're running faster and more efficient and you have the strength and the biomechanics to pull off 10-minute miles, 11-minute miles, man, it is so much more enjoyable. It feels so much better on your skeleton to go a little faster. And to be perfectly honest, like I just don't think there's that many super duper slow runners out there. They think that they are, but technically they're really not.
Hmm.
So speeding them up, giving them cues, giving them the strength, and all of a sudden their tempos dramatically change. Their efficiency goes through the roof. It's a way more fun way to do this sport.
How about, I love this. I love the discussion on the tempo, as you mentioned, the stride rate. This is all great. I'm curious, what about the upper body? Where do
Ah,
you where do you focus on that, and what do you tell them?
so the longer the distance your A race is, I think the more important your upper body strength is for runners, particularly. Obviously, swimming upper body strength is a really big deal. Cycling, it's actually a way bigger deal than people believe in cycling. It's an anchor point to the bike. So if you don't have strong anchor points, then you're not going to be able to deliver the force into the frame like we want. But with running, the opposite shoulder works as a stabilizer and helps advance the other hip. So upright posture, strong shoulders can help anchor your hips. And so if you're training for 50K, 50 miles, and you have a backpack on, especially, you're going to start to slouch. And that slouch is upper body strength, and that helps you deliver oxygen. So whenever I'm driving around and somebody's out for a run, I just can't help myself. If I see elbows moving away from your side, the further the elbows go to the side, the weaker the contralateral hip is, the opposite hip. And what a person will do is throw that elbow out and try to use their elbows to help advance the opposite hip. And so that's pretty much straight across the board. And to be honest, I spend more time on the running cues about how the person's landing than I do the upper body. But I will point out this elbow position because it creates more rotation than the person needs, and that can become a problem, especially if they're here for back pain.
Hmm.
I've seen it several times with people. They have orthopedically bad issues in their lower body that it gets truncated up to the upper body, and then one arm is now like swinging wild, or
Yeah,
and that's a good sign too that there's issues lower if they have
Yeah.
that. And so I
Yeah.
know you're probably seeing that as well.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
You can almost hang your hat on it that the opposite hip or whatever elbow is flying out, that's where that issue is.
Yep.
And then lower back hip, they're always connected. And if a person's got hip, they got back. And so you just follow these clues and they're pretty much always there.
I love that. So curious, here in Vegas, it's obviously hot in the summer.
Yeah.
I know this is a little bit of a different question, but a lot of times people will run with a bottle in their hand.
Yeah.
And do you talk with them about, staying hydrated? I'm sure you do, but
Yeah.
different strategies to carry hydration?
Yeah. I'm really proud that I have 800-meter girls, 100, 200 girls. Right now we have cross country warming up, and I have a couple of cross country girls in the clinic, and all the way to 100 miles, right? 100 miles is a whole different animal than, say, competitive 5K in college. But how the person is hydrating, whether it's a vest or two handhelds or one handheld, those do matter. and one thing that I really would have loved to do some research on is pushing a stroller.
Mm-hmm.
There's actually there's no literature out there on pushing a stroller. And I'm really curious as to what the demand is on the gait and what the demand is on effort level and pace, because based on treating tons and tons of postnatal moms, that's a formidable foe. I mean, it's heavy to push, especially if you're in up hills and stuff. And you know, I don't know about you guys, but I don't want to be passed in a race by a woman pushing a stroller. But they're badasses, and I would love to know more about what kind of changes that the gait makes. But other than that, the thing I'm saying mostly with heat these days is, I probably say this 10 times a day. The heat right now is accepting about 30 seconds to a minute of your effort. And if you look down at your watch and you're bummed out with how fast that was, subtract a minute. You'll probably be much happier with that effort. And then when the sun goes away and the heat's gone and your performance soars, that's the benefit of training here. And I try to discourage long course who have their big phase in July or August, because it's such a hard thing to do. But I don't really find that the water bottles and stuff offer that much of a challenge.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's good. That's great. Oh, I love the stroller part. In fact, we've got our stroller runners here. I know you're talking probably more about the strollers for kids, but we've got, Team Hoyt Las Vegas here with the Capsudos. And
Right.
Tony actually did just post, he said, oh, hamstring pressure pushing. So
Yes.
that's a big deal.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I mean, you have to use your hip extensors more to drive more load moving forward. I could see how that would happen.
yeah.
But I would love to be able to say, this is what we should do as the mom is getting ready to give birth.
Mm-hmm.
Prepare for that.
Yeah.
A lot of moms don't want to listen to traditional doctors when they want to start running right away.
Yeah.
So I love to be able to have some research to back up.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody wants to do research on pregnant ladies, though.
It is a gap in the research for sure.
For sure. Yeah.
That's great. We'll have to talk after we're done here. So
Yeah, I'm all for it.
oh.
So let me ask you another question. So you made mention about strength a few times.
Yeah.
So in general, what are you seeing as far as deficits for just the average runner that comes in, and maybe there's a few kind of key things you could talk about for our audience?
Definitely. I mean, I think if you poll 100 triathletes, trail runners about what is happening at maximum velocity, probably every one of them is going to say, he just puts heavy loads on people. The reason why I'm loading these runners is because the ground reaction force is somewhere between 2 and 7 times your body weight in ground reaction force. The only way I know how to bridge a body over to be able to tolerate that type of load is to put a heavy bar on your back. Now, you're not going to touch a heavy bar your first day. It's a process to develop connective tissue properties that can accept a load like that. To answer your question, there's not one single injured runner with healthy, happy hips and spine. There's always what I would call tier 1 issues of hip and spine. That means my back is too stiff or my hips are unstable. And if I stand in a gym where these exercises will be done, I won't see anybody for a whole week. They're lower level than what people want to do when they go to the gym. And a staple of how my runners warm up, how their rehab goes, and how we prepare to squat. So the old Jane Fonda's,
yep.
I think that those are absolutely essential. And what I find is if they're doing them, they're not doing them heavy enough. Mm-hmm. So we're trying to stabilize your femur against your pelvis. It needs to be heavy. So 10 or 12 pounds of ankle weights is not uncommon for a healthy, efficient runner to be doing as a warm-up for a heavy squat. which is not traditional mentality, but your squat mechanics actually translate to your running mechanics perfectly if the squat is executed in a way that loads the muscles the same way they get loaded when you run. We have this mentality that running is one foot in front of the other, but it's an organization of muscles that are stabilizing and pushing, and it's the same exact skill that we develop when we squat. The particulars of the squat is probably a whole nother podcast. But if they have strength on the table, they can apply that strength to movement and then load that strength, take that strength and make it move fast. That's how we convert them to run pain-free. The impairments are somewhere in there. They don't have the foundation strength. They can't control it when they move. They can't apply a load to it, or they can't keep it when it moves fast. And somewhere in there is where the impairments are. So I would say lumbar spine stability and hip stability, and then graduate to a heavy squat. Heavy deadlift is probably right on the back of a heavy squat. So that's how I treat these runners to be able to convert the ground reaction force into tissues that can tolerate that stress.
So just more, because I want to know, is your philosophy more centered around single leg or double
I don't
leg?
do any single leg.
Okay, because I know there's a lot of literature and people that write, you're a runner, you're mostly single leg.
Right.
So why is that your philosophy? Where's your background?
I have a hard and fast opinion about that, because if you run 3 miles and we count the strides that you take in 1 mile and multiply that times 3, we're doing a repetitive activity. If you're cross training into the same repetitive activity, you're not diversifying as an athlete. So I do see the correlation between, if you're going to use it one leg, train it one leg, but at the same time, the skill development of being able to have connective tissue that can tolerate that load means it's got to be heavy. My opinion, the definition of heavy is the heaviest load you can tolerate through the greatest amount of range of motion. And if you do one leg at a time, you're not going to be able to reach those loads. So 2 to 7 times your body weight and ground reaction force means it has to be heavy. And so, I see all these really elite outfits of track runners, and their strength session is 10-pound dumbbells and lunges. And I'm like, what are we doing here, guys? That's not cross training. That's feeding into the same movement patterns that you use when you run, and it's adding to the number of contacts in a single limb stance. Let's diversify. Let's teach this connective tissue how to tolerate more load than the load that's coming. And that's why I think it needs to be heavy. And I think chronic hip stability that's only trained with 10-pound dumbbells is never going to catch up to the ground reaction force that's moving through there. And so the compensation strategy will occur when they use their gait, and that gait deficiency over time is what creates the injury. So put them underneath a heavy barbell with some proficiency. The cues we worked on at the gait evaluation are now totally in play, and they can use them when the ground reaction force comes. So I think it has to be heavy. And I think that the way that the muscles in the hips and thighs are accepting that load is exactly the same way they do when they run. And it's bilateral.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
No, I love it. And actually, someone jumped on this. Is it almost like, this is a comment, almost like muscle confusion? Do you try to introduce a different coordination or something like that? Is that?
I don't. The reason is the ground is in the same place every time. So if I put you on, say, foam or Bosu balls or some sort of compliant surface, I'm teaching you to interact with an artificial environment. That's not going to occur when you run. So having the awareness of how to utilize hip and knee mechanics that are efficient with gait have to happen on a normal ground. So I don't think that I think I'm the opposite of confusion. I'm teaching an individual muscle group how to tolerate a load, and then I'm teaching this muscle group how to organize the bones in a way that the muscles accept the load. Teach the whole system how to tolerate more stress.
Yeah.
And then when we apply that stress to running, now the connective tissue can rise to the occasion.
I love it. That goes right along with some of the things that we've talked about, where we encourage people to run on different surfaces, run on trails, run on pavement, run on this.
I mean,
and
that's
that.
why trail runners be road runners.
Yeah. Well, and
Trail running is harder on our skeleton than road, and people, that's a really, really common myth. So trail runners and road runners in a race, I'm going to pick the trail runner every time. They teach themselves a higher level of ground reaction force than road running. And there's a big contingent of triathletes who are like, oh, I'll never run trail. I'm bound to get hurt. Well, that's why you're hurt, because you're not willing to put yourself in a position to rise to the occasion, so that when running on the road is easier than running on trail, you have the connective tissue properties to pull it off. So season time, it's definitely a perfect time. A race finished 2 weeks ago and you're ready to get back to running, and you want to do 2 miles out of McCullough, man, go for it. Go for it. Get out there, see some pretty stuff, have a harder run than you're used to, and teach these connective tissues how to tolerate more ground reaction force. And then when you get back to road, it's easier, feels better.
Well, see, and I love it. You started this discussion in the beginning with the idea that running is a skill, and you're in essence teaching different skills on doing these different running surfaces as well as the different exercises.
Totally.
Where does age come into play here?
Age?
Yeah.
Ooh. So I have a real sore place in my mouth for people who say, I'm too old.
I'm too old.
There are no bad runs, only unprepared bodies, and I don't care how old you are. If you cannot tolerate ground reaction force and you're 8 years old or 80 years old, that's the problem. It's not your age. Now, you do bring what I would call a training age, which is, what kinds of things have your tissues had to tolerate over time. And if your training age is very low and you're not in great shape as you're older, obviously that person's going to have a harder time fast, long. But over time, can they develop connective tissue properties that can pull that off? Absolutely. I start with the body, make sure the body's nice and sound, lumbar spine range of motion, hip stability, and then work to a heavy squat. And if they can heavy squat, they can box jump. There's no reason why they can't run. And I don't care how old they are. So it really just depends on what kind of connective tissue properties are they starting with. And then from there, we can build expectations as far as running those. But I don't think it matters how old you are. I think it matters is what you've done for me lately. And that's what your connective tissue will tell you.
Oh, I love it. That's great. So, and I mean, this gets right into the idea that running is known as an overuse injury sport. But I think what I'm hearing from you is, there's an optimism to avoid an injury, as well as once you are injured, coming back from an injury, regardless of your age.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, the medical community is famous for saying you should stop. It's bad for you. Puts these bad seeds in people's brains and they turn into all these bad things. Having somebody in your community who's literally never going to tell you should stop. Let's find a way to do it. There's something about you that you can change to be able to get back to that. I think really, really powerful tool to have. And the number, I'm super proud and humbled with the stories of people who come through here and the epic shit that they do as a result of sorting through all those details. And, it doesn't matter how old you are. It only matters how you've trained up to this point and how prepared are you for this load when it comes. And if you're not prepared, it doesn't matter how old you are, it's going to win.
Mm-hmm.
So we just change how prepared they are, and all of a sudden the activities change.
I love it. Now, we're also speaking to a lot of triathletes out there. I mean,
Yep.
you have your runners that just run, and now you've got triathletes that have the three sports together, two other sports on
Right.
top of running. When do you get them to start taking mileage off of running and focusing more on the other sports?
This is one of my favorite discussions to have with coaches. I think there's a flaw in the old school approach to coaching triathletes, in that you have this matchbook, right? This matchbook that you shouldn't burn leading up to your run. Well, if you're, and let's be honest, I don't know what you guys think, but I believe your entire race depends on your ability to get off of that bike and run.
Mm-hmm.
There's a reason why no first person out of the water at Kona has ever won Kona. That's a fact.
Mm-hmm.
The fastest cyclist very, very rarely wins. I think it's like 2% of the time or 5% of the time. The fastest runners run down the faster swimmers and faster cyclists. So this is a running sport that does other things, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And if you train to run hard off the bike, and you train that way for months leading up to your race, then your matchbook is much, much bigger than most people believe. And if you are not optimum with your strength and not optimum with your biomechanics, and you're fatigued from 2 activities prior to running, then yes, you're going to get yourself in trouble if you try to overpace yourself. But I think if you train to go hard off the bike and you routinely go hard off the bike, that you can train that in. And I think the Norwegians are having a lot of success with that right now, with all the lactate threshold stuff they're doing running wise right off the bike. And so when I coach this youth triathlon team, these girls are running 6 minutes off the bike, 5:40s off the bike at 14 years old. We don't have time to wait for a warm-up period. You have 30 seconds to transition, and then 6-minute mile pace over a 5K right now. So I've seen them train hard off the bike, hill repeats right off the bike, stuff like that. So I think it's just a mentality from the very beginning that if you're teaching them that they should hold back on the end of their bike to protect their running legs, that's not putting them in the optimum position to run hard off the bike.
No, I love that. So one of the things that I think we should be doing is especially in longer course stuff, is if you have to go easy at the end of your bike so you can run, the beginning of your bike was too hard. Right. Like, because that 10 minutes of going easy is not going to make up for that. You went too hard for the first 4 hours.
Right. And then so I read a few studies as a result of all this extra training that I did that shows that your optimum run performance should only be 5% less than your open performance.
Yep.
So if you're not training the open speed of your running to improve, how is your runs performance going to improve off the bike? So at the end of the day, like how you pace your bike, is going to be a general status for how your legs are, but you also have to train with that wattage in order to get off and run at that particular speed. Yep. So going easy on the end of that bike so that you can run hard is like not physiologically sound, even though that's what we've been doing for the last 20 or 30 years.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree totally. My best races have been when I finished the bike hard, and
they're 2 separate systems.
Jump right into it.
If your bike system is optimum and your run system is optimum, and you train changing systems, you don't have to worry about burning those matches. But if you never train it that way and it doesn't connect in your run, then yeah, you're gonna have a crash and burn type run. But it's not because it's possible physiologically, which is where we're coming from. It's because you didn't train it.
Yep.
Because you didn't do enough hard efforts off the bike. And so that's probably a whole nother topic.
Try not going hard at Pumpkin Man on the end of your bike ride. You won't make it up that hill.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a ridiculous course.
Yeah, you
It's
got
fun,
about
though.
200 yards to take it easy. That's
Yeah,
about it.
exactly. Just enough time to get your shoes off. That's what
Yeah, climb this and then go for a downhill run. See how good.
So Ron, someone mentions in the comment that you're also a great encourager during an event. I'm curious though, can you watch an event and enjoy it, or are you always watching it looking for, hey, that this person should be doing it this way or that way? I mean, how is watching an event?
It depends on who's in it, right? So there was a time where I would have as many as 19 kids in a race.
Yeah.
And, my top kid is trying to win overall. My slowest kid is, just trying to finish.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I really love about being in a position to influence these kids is like all this Positive Coaching Alliance and, this, the USA Triathlon youth certification is really big on the Positive Coaching Alliance, and reading a lot of that literature and just listening to how coaches talk to, watching videos of how coaches talk and how you can implement confidence in the way that you train and the way that you describe what the workout's going to be. Like, I pay attention to all those details. And if a person is in the clinic and, not going to be able to do Las Vegas Triathlon, but I'm hoping for Pumpkin Man, like that person needs a confidence boost. And so how do we reframe all this? And what they usually have is a PR at Pumpkin Man because, all this mental work that they did as a result of being injured. So we turn this problem into something that's positive. So it really just depends on who the athlete is. And, what's really hard about standing there watching a triathlon, especially if we pick Pumpkin Man, is you're either at the swim or you're at the run. It's really hard to be at both.
Yeah.
And we, I really believe that triathlon is a lot of problem solving. And so up to that point, you haven't heard all the problem solving that's going on. And that's the wrong time to coach because you don't know what that person's been through on the swim and the bike, because I've been up here at this park this whole time. And so at that moment, if all the work has been done, like that's not the time for me to coach. It's the time for me to, it's the time for them to know that I'm here. And it's a time for them to know that I believe in them. And it's a time for them to just get a boost by seeing a familiar face. And so, I like when I coached this youth on this youth circuit, I heard these coaches just yell awful things to a kid in the middle of the race. Like, what in the world are you doing? This is the wrong time to be coaching. If you have to coach right now, your training sessions 2 months ago didn't matter as much as they should have. And if you're going to put something negative in that kid's head right now, how are they going to finish this 5K where they're emptying the tank? The boys are 5 minutes off the bike. How are you going to run 5-minute miles with you shouting negative things? And so I just try to be a student of how a positive coach would approach that situation. And, hopefully the work that we did in training was well enough that when the problem solving occurred, they made good decisions. And, that's the frame of mind of that person right now. It's like if you go to a youth baseball game or softball game and you hear dad shouting batting mechanics things while the kid's batting, like, you're delusional, man. A, the kid can't hear you. B, if he did, he's probably not thinking about what you want him to think about right now. And all you're doing is distracting him. So I just think there's a time and a place for all that. And I would try to hide all that criticism and all that, constructive feedback for training when it's one-on-one, when I can, have the right frame of mind of the athlete happening right there. In the middle of the race, it's just about building confidence and, being positive and that's the best thing I can offer at that moment. So like, let's not plant seeds.
I love this. This is great. And Ron, I said we'd keep you for 30 minutes and we've gone an hour. So
Ah, I run my mouth too much.
no, this is
Problem.
Great.
there's so many gems here, and I actually wrote a few down. So let me go through some of the gems that you brought up during this time. And I'll start with the one you just ended. In essence, train the mental aspect, and there's a right time to coach and to create that positive narrative. That is
Absolutely.
such a great message to give out. I wrote down the triathlon is a running sport where you do other things. I really like that.
Yeah,
Train,
I really believe that this is a running sport where we just try to get tired.
yeah, I
And you
love
run
it.
when you're tired,
Yeah, train to bike, train to swim, so you can run. I think
so
that's
you can
another
run
great.
tired. Yep.
This one I really liked, and I'm going to steal this. I'll certainly give you credit. There are no bad runs, just unprepared bodies.
Unprepared bodies.
That is really great. And if you're going to change your stride rate, you're probably best to go faster on your stride rate. There's probably no one taking too fast of a stride
Yeah,
rate.
I think if we were guessing that, the chances are it's got to go up.
Yep.
Yeah.
And
But,
then,
but the cue, so if you're out there and you're like, yep, I've been trying to work on my stride rate. If you're trying to make it from 160 to 180, it's too big of a change.
yep, yep.
The best cue is move your feet faster than you feel comfortable with, and whatever is available will be available. And that's the healthiest way to take it to 180 over
Mm, that's great. And I wrote down, don't strive for pain-free today. It's a long-term project.
Yeah. Yeah, the type of treatment that I offer, sometimes person doesn't leave better. And I
Mhm.
have this idea that if you're gonna pay somebody to help you with your injury, you got to leave better right now.
Mhm.
Do you want to be better, or do you want to feel better?
Mhm.
So that's what I'm trying to do, is help runners be better runners, develop the skill of running, and just leave with a temporary band-aid.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And that's the last one I wrote down. You just mentioned it. Running is a skill.
absolutely.
Mhm.
It's a Olympic sport.
Yeah.
I mean, some of these runners have 10,000 hours of running on a track.
Yeah.
On a track, 10,000 hours, not to mention all the other running that they do away from the track. So, a little grace, a little bit of patience, and we can help you run fast with no pain.
Awesome.
Hey, you have been so generous with your time and sharing your expertise and the secret sauce. This is
So
awesome.
I have a question for you guys.
Okay.
You guys want to come on my show?
Of course.
I would love to have you guys on my show. So Hyperspeed Radio is all things maximum velocity, just trying to add to the body of knowledge, just like you guys are. And I think we're like-minded and, trying to do the best we can to help people be successful. So I would really love a shot for you guys to come on my show.
Would
Oh,
love it.
I would love it. Yeah, that'd be great.
We come to your
guys-
studio?
Yeah, you guys want to come to the studio?
Yeah, sure.
I think that would be great.
That'll be fun. Okay.
Well,
And we'll come.
maybe somebody can suggest a topic.
Yeah. That's
Yeah, I think it would be great.
Maybe we'll get John on. Maybe we'll get John on your treadmill and check him out.
Maybe we could. That would be fun. Well, the one thing that I will say about your guys' show is you guys hold a really amazing place for the students at UNLV, and the body of knowledge that reaches the students of triathlon that are the Las Vegas Triathlon. Sometimes we forget that you guys are phenomenal triathletes, and I would love an opportunity to interview the athletes that you guys are. And I wonder if that's maybe a different perspective for folks, because you guys have done some amazing things in this sport specifically. And I don't think enough people realize that.
Well, thank you very much for that.
Yeah.
It doesn't always feel like it, huh, John?
Well, I mean, you get lost in the day-to-day operations of these training programs you guys got. And I'd love to dig in there, the races you've done in Europe, the big time, races you've done on behalf of Canada and all that, man. I'd love a chance to pick your brain about all that. I'm sure there's not a lot of people who know all those details. You guys are both humble, and try to turn it around and give it out. But I think the community needs to hear a little bit more about you guys and your training and all that, because that's what I'm curious about.
Okay.
What do the students of triathlon do for themselves? I think it would be a really fun topic.
Sounds great.
I
look
love
forward
it,
to it.
and we love triathlon, and so we've had some successes, we've had some not so successful races, but
That's
that's
the
all
nature of the
part of it.
game.
That's the package. That's the
That is
package.
it.
So
You can't have the highs without the.
that's exactly right. I love
Yeah.
it. Hey, Ron, this has been so great talking with you. Thank you again for.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Love what you guys are doing.
All right. Awesome. Thanks.
Thanks, guys.